Hi, Seema. How are you?
I'm so over the moon this week in particular, um, because it feels like just such a wonderful, wonderful bit of synchronicity that you're able to join us here as the director of programs. Um, it's our first full-time position other than like me behind every window. And you know, we met 2014, I think.
No, before that, I think maybe 2012 or 2013, even.
Wow.
Yeah.
And when I was working at Walter Reed in Fort Belvoir, and you were working for USO Metro, opening the center at Fort Belvoir. I don't think the center at Walter Reed was
Correct.
open yet. When we set to work getting those art studios nice and dirty. Um, and doing lots and lots of incredible, some of the peak moments of my career were made possible through collaboration with you. And it's just been such an extraordinary journey to get to this point where we're so excited and fortunate to have you applying your vision and talents and organization skills.
My nerdy skills, you mean?
Your nerdy skills that are so good. I mean, I've learned so much from you over these many years, and I'm really excited to keep learning and growing from you and with you. So it's really, really exciting. You didn't come directly from USO Metro, though. You had another really cool and important and interesting job. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've been up to, what you were doing most recently?
Yeah, sure. So I was the director of program for Project Create. It's a nonprofit in Southeast DC that um, aims to make arts accessible to the kids that are there. So every program there is free, and we offered so many different mediums, whether it be photography or music production or visual art. There was a strong belief in art therapy as well. And as an art therapist, it was nice to be in an organization that was looking to promote art therapy and create a therapeutic environment in any class that was offered. So it was a great opportunity and experience, and I'm so glad that I had that chance.
Yeah, and I'm sure you did such great things there. Um, and now, of course, what CBAW does is not art therapy. We're not a clinical provider. Though we got our start in the military healthcare system. It was very much not clinical, the work that we did. How do you think art therapy, or how do you see art therapy in relation to the community-based art programs that we're doing? How do they differ? How do they fit?
So art can be therapeutic, any medium, any type of group that you participate in, but unless it's led by an art therapist and they're looking at specific goals, in that clinical setting, they also know all the background information about the person who's coming into that group and can just make sure that, we're not doing an art process that might trigger anything, or, have an exact plan of what we're going to do for the next 6 to 8 weeks. As opposed into a community space, we make a space very safe. We want everyone to feel comfortable and be able to open up. And, I've found in the work that we do, we're not in the clinical space, but I think by offering that safe and brave space that we have in our studio spaces, which, whether it be virtual or in person, it has allowed service members and participants to just feel at ease and be able to open up on their own and on their own time too.
Yeah, because of there's a clinical timeline. And I think what you just said about, we don't necessarily know
Mhm.
everyone's story. There's not like a requirement like, hey, we're going to address this thing in your chart. We're going to leave space for you to talk about whatever you want to talk about.
Mhm.
Which is, yeah, it's such a point. But then it also means that you don't know what might trigger someone.
Mhm.
How do we navigate that?
So I think for both of us, we've always encountered someone who's, gets triggered by, a writing prompt or an art project that they're working on, and then spending time with them to make sure that they're okay. And then I think we've always, advocated for them to speak with their own therapist and clinical team, because, they're two separate things, and we want to make sure that they're continuing to get that care.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like people are very afraid of the word triggered.
Mhm.
But it's not a be all end all state. And I think I worked with a clinician once who said, no, like actually like figuring out what our triggers are is important too. And like discovering whatever information is there is necessary. Yeah. But it's, but you don't, it can be, I know when we have facilitators come in for the first time, there's a lot of these, like, what do I do? And it's like, don't push anyone, right? Like, let people decide if they want, because most people can feel like, oh, this is not what I need to do.
Mhm.
Write about your pet instead.
Yeah, and I think for people who have facilitated for a long time, I think you can look at someone and get some of those nonverbal cues and understand we don't want to go there. We don't want to push this person, and can kind of lay off and then just check in with them at the end. And it takes a little bit of, practice to do that.
Absolutely. And of course, you are an art therapist because you're an artist, right?
Yeah.
And so when did you like start making art, or when did you realize like you loved making art?
So I have, when I was 5 or around that age, I had a lot of free time when everybody would take a nap in my house, all the adults. And so I'd watch Bob Ross. And I know people are very, very like, oh gosh, Bob Ross, he just does the same kind of paintings. But he made arts accessible to someone like me who's sitting at home, didn't have the ability to buy art materials and whatnot. So just watching him and listening to him, I think that kind of just got this part of me that was interested in that creativity. And I remember asking my parents, can you get me materials? And they're like, we're not there right now. We can't buy you materials. So I remember just sitting next to him and pretending like I had a book as my palette and a plastic screwdriver, and looking at with him, being like, okay, I can paint this. And I would just paint alongside with him. So use my creativity and my imaginative world of painting with Bob Ross. But I think ever since then, it was, when I did have art materials, like even the basic stuff from school, crayons, markers. And then it was just more of me spending time drawing and all of that in my spare time as I was growing up. And I've always taken art classes. I've always done, like art clubs or whatever in, school. And then I took art classes in college as well. So
I love this Bob Ross origin story. Because Bob Ross is, of course,
weird for it.
Because Bob Ross is, of course, also a veteran, right? He's an Air Force veteran.
Yes, he is.
How
my
did you
whole world has come full circle, pretty much.
Full circle? Yeah, well, it's incredible. How did you come to working with the military originally? How'd you?
So, no, USO was just looking for an art therapist at that time, because they were, as you mentioned, they were building this new facility at Fort Belvoir and at Bethesda's military bases, and they wanted an art therapist to lead the programs that were being facilitated in those art studio spaces, so that it could be done responsibly and safe. And there's a lot more thought put into the programs as opposed to just anyone kind of being in that space. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I applied and got the job. I was very excited.
Yeah, but and it's sort of become your life's work. You love working with service members.
I do.
And veterans. Which so do I. I also have like a very civilian background and have found like, I think there are some cultural similarities between
Mhm.
like the Eastern and South Asian culture that I grew up in and the sort of hierarchy and like respect and I don't know, there's something about the structure that
Yeah, I can definitely
feels
see
similar.
that. Our I think a lot of people, when we were working with service members and they would retire and people would be like, oh, they're just sad about, losing their jobs. And I was like, no, this is like a whole cultural thing. There's like when you're in the military with other military, they just understand you. There's all these rituals and ceremonies. And like you said, there's a hierarchy and structure of here's who you give your respect to because they're an elder in our culture, but someone of higher rank in the military. So yeah, definitely parallels between the different cultures, or just that it is a culture of its own.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and on this sort of question of ritual, a lot of the things that we did were about reclaiming ritual in, whether it was like combat paper, where folks would take military uniforms and go through the process of turning them into paper, which we did with partner organizations, or even, the weekly ritual of the open studios, or for us, we have like all of these weekly programs that have this sort of like, you show up for it. Um, what is the role of ritual in your personal art making practice,
Um,
if there is one?
there's not really a role. I think I just take some time for myself to kind of just bring myself into the space and the time to make art, and then
Mhm.
I go from there. But I don't think there's a necessarily there's an actual ritual, but I guess that is the ritual, that is what I do. I take some
Right.
time for myself, reflect, and then make art, and at the end also reflect to see what I have done, and why did I make that, or what should I do next after looking at what I've created.
Oh, that's so you reflect before you begin putting anything on the
Mm.
paper or whatever the substrate is. Interesting. I love that. Just like taking a moment to think about what you want to do. How do you use art in your, like, what's your medium, and how has it shown up for you?
I've always been interested in drawing and painting, and visual journaling is something that really is a part of that reflection and spending time, whether it's writing and then making art, or making art and then writing, exploring with a lot of different materials. In addition to that, I've actually been taking a portraiture class where I'm learning how to draw people's faces so I can be better at that. So I can be more skilled in those things. So doing a lot of charcoal drawings more recently.
Oh, wow. And that's a kind of tricky medium because it's like it moves all over the damn page.
Blends when I don't need it to blend.
All of that. So are you pretty regular with like taking like honing your craft in new directions? Is that like
Yeah,
part
I
of your
think
practice?
I think that for me to set that time aside to make art, if I take a class, then I have to do it, and I will make time for it, and I will put my effort into it. If I try to do it just on my own, there'll be lapses of time of me, spent actually doing what I should be doing. And then when I was facilitating groups, at that time, there was a lot of art making because I was trying different processes because, I want to share different techniques for the people that I work with. And it's always important that someone finds what works for them. That's a lot of my philosophy. And, you can't expect, because I like drawing and painting doesn't mean someone else likes that. So you have to try different materials and different processes and be able to share that with, whoever you're working with so that they can figure out which one, is the best for them.
Yeah. And I think the thing about find what works for you is you have to be willing to like suffer through what doesn't work for you.
Yes.
Um, which is really, really hard. And how have you helped people? Because I've seen you're a master at this, at being like, it's okay that you think this sucks, come tomorrow or next week. And they do.
Sometimes you just have to say, I'll see you there. And then just look at them and they know that they're, I think it's also part of that cultural, like, yes, ma'am. Okay. And then they show up, whether they wanted to or not. And I think we always try to find something maybe simple and, success oriented at the beginning so that they can feel that they've mastered something when they finish. And we also have a lot of tools that we've used to help people. So if they can't draw something, being able to trace it, things like that will help them feel like, oh, I can do this. And what's also been helpful is just having all the other service members be in the group, and they're so welcoming, and they're like, well, why don't you try this with me? Or they'll show them around the studio, and they just take it from there. I think that in itself is very helpful.
It's the community, right? It's like also the culture within this sort of our subculture of the arts community within these spaces of just being like, hey, there's space. It's like I don't think I've ever seen anyone make fun of somebody else's artwork or be a jerk about it. Which is not, I've taught in elementary schools. That's not my experience.
This is true. This is true with kids.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's pretty phenomenal. What are you excited about coming up, like in terms of workshops, ideas, programs, now that you're here, which I'm so excited about. And of course, I preloaded your inbox by copying you on every email since January. So you'll be caught up with that in 2 weeks. And then what are you excited about?
I think I want to figure out what people are looking for, and being able to similarly, find these different processes and mediums, and, work with maybe some partners or other artists that I know that can share that with them. Because like I said, we have to try all these different things before we figure out what it is that we like. So, just being able to bring a variety of different mediums and workshops, I think that's my goal. And so that everybody gets to try a little bit of everything and then figure out what they want to focus on. And then let's figure out, how do we make that happen now that you found this is what you want to do? How do we go from here?
I love it. I love it. Well, welcome, Ashy. We're so, so, so excited to have you back and to build this with you. Thanks so much.
I'm so excited to be here. I'm very excited to get started and see everybody and start programming.